Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Be Like Christ. We are in Ezra chapter 8 today. This chapter I'd consider kind of a chapter of transition where we have Ezra, who we met in the last chapter, now traveling from Babylonia to Judah. And so he's going to make that trip, and then he's kind of going to get to work in chapters 9 and 10. On our PDF, as always, I have the full kind of timeline of the book of Ezra, some of the key events. Let's just cover the last two. Those are kind of the important ones for where we're picking up today. So in 516 BC, the construction on the temple was finally completed. Now we're skipping forward about 60 years or so to Ezra's arrival in Jerusalem, which would have taken place approximately 457 BC. Our key figures in this chapter are going to include the captives of Judah. They're no longer captive, and they've been moving back to Judah in waves from Babylonia, where they spent 70 years in captivity. So there was a wave that went with Zerubbabel, and then several decades later, now Ezra is leading another wave of people back from Babylonia to live in the Promised Land. We talked about Artaxerxes Longimanus in our last chapter. He's the new king of Persia during the time of Ezra, and Ezra has a very good relationship with him. We also have, of course, Ezra. He's a priest and a scribe who was skilled in the law of God, and that's where this book gets its name from. The key locations on our map pretty much remain the same. We have Babylonia in the east. We have Judah and Jerusalem in the west. Now we have a new place that's going to be mentioned here, the river Ahava. Ezra gathers the group of Israelites that are going to return to the Promised Land at this river Ahava in preparation to make the journey. We don't know exactly where this river was located. Some people think it was maybe up the river from Babylon, the city of Babylon, maybe 80 miles or so, but the location is still debated. So now we can get into chapter 8 and break it down. I've got 4 sections today. The first one is, of course, everyone's most favorite type of section. It's a genealogy or a list of names and numbers. Yes, fun. So that's the first 14 verses of the chapter, genealogy of the exiles who returned with Ezra. This portion of Ezra's writing is devoted to documenting the number of men who traveled with him from Babylonia to Jerusalem in this new wave of returning Israelites. According to the list, there were about 1,500 men who made the trip with him. If you take the time to add up all those numbers that you read in the text, which I did, it comes to about 1,500. Section number 2 is kind of interesting. In verses 15 through 20, Ezra recruits Levites to make the return journey to Judah. So when all the people had gathered at this river Ahava, Ezra noticed something. There weren't any men from the tribe of Levi in their company. We don't know exactly why, but that's what he sees. Ezra wanted some Levites to accompany them back to Jerusalem so that they could be ministers in the temple. So what Ezra does is he gets a group of men, and then he sends those men out to recruit some Levites, and they were actually successful. They found at least 40 or close to 40 Levites and 220 people who could serve in the capacity of being temple servants. Section number 2 is pretty short, verses 21 through 23, a fast for a safe journey. So Ezra didn't want to ask King Artaxerxes for an armed guard to accompany them back to Judah, even though they were going to be carrying a substantial amount of money. And the reason for this is because he had already kind of bragged on God, saying that their company would be safe and protected because God's hand was on them for good. So then he didn't want to, turn around after saying that and be like, well, by the way, though, could we have some soldiers to protect us? He was going to rely on God. So instead of going to the king and asking for soldiers, he declared a fast, and him and his company fasted and prayed for God to watch over them on this long journey they're about to take. So now let's finally talk about that journey in verses 24 through 36. We've titled this section, Distribution of the Money for Transport. So Ezra was going to be transporting a large amount of money, and the amount is listed in the text. 650 talents of gold, silver vessels of 200 talents, 100 talents of gold, 20 bowls of gold, and 2 vessels of very fine bronze. Now, just to give you an idea, you can kind of do the math in your head. A talent weighed somewhere between like 55 to 75 pounds or 25 to 34 kilograms. So quite a bit of gold and silver. You can see why someone might want to rob their company and take all their loot on the way as they were traveling. But Ezra trusted God. And part of the way that he was going to transport this money was he was going to distribute it up between some of the leading men. So he picks 12 of the leading priests. He divides the money and the goods, the precious things amongst them, and they are now entrusted with getting those things to Jerusalem safely. In very biblical fashion, Ezra's long, probably somewhat difficult 5-month journey is summarized with extreme brevity in just verses 31 and 32. We've been seeing that in our Genesis podcast that we've been studying. Some of the long journeys get summarized very quickly. After this 5-month journey, they arrive in Jerusalem, and a few days later, they take all these precious things to the temple, and the priests count them, weigh them, and then make records of them. So they are successful. God has answered their prayer to bring them safely to Jerusalem. These newly returned exiles then worship the Lord with sacrifices. They sacrifice 12 bulls, 96 rams, 77 lambs, and 12 male goats as a sin offering. So that's our summary of chapter 8. Let's talk about our application now. Ezra didn't want to return to Jerusalem without some men from the tribe of Levi to help in the administration of the temple. He had a need, and so he then went out and he recruited to fill that need. His actions kind of reminded me of Barnabas. When Barnabas in the New Testament, the book of Acts chapter 11, he goes and he recruits Paul to be his co-worker. He has to go up and find Paul, and then they go to Antioch and they start working together. Now, I think these examples stand in contrast to a common practice, one that I admit that I am guilty of, and that is praying for help and then just kind of expecting God to drop it in our laps, like saying, oh, Lord, I'd like somebody to come help me with this project or this thing that I'm working on, or to assist me in undertaking some need in the church that needs to be done. It's like, Lord, just send that person to me. I'll sit here and wait, and they'll, if you answer my prayer, they'll just come by, I guess, and they'll ask to help me. And then I'll know that it was you and you've answered my prayers. That's not the way that Ezra and the way that Barnabas goes about finding the people that they need to help them. Sometimes we need to be proactive in working towards a positive answer to our prayers. It's not just sitting around waiting for God to do all the work for us. We all probably want our prayers to be answered the way that Abraham's servants did when he went to find a wife for Isaac. Do you remember that? He goes to the well in Genesis chapter 24 and he says, Lord, send me a woman, whichever woman comes by this well and offers to give me some water and also water my camels. That'll be the person who I know I'm supposed to choose. And God delivers that woman to him. We all want our prayers answered that way, but that's not the only way that God answers prayers. Sometimes we need to follow Jesus' example with his apostles. He prayed all night, and then he went out and recruited the men, his apostles, who he wanted to help him. Luke chapter 6, verse 12 through 16.